Bhante, so I had two questions that have come up. One is, people have asked me, what is nobility in this Dhamma?
Nobility.
Nobility, yes. And they have specifically used the word Sotapanna. So if you could please clarify for the listeners what defines nobility in this teaching, on this path. And the other question has to do with the requisites of monastics. If you also could help the public understand what are the requisites of monks? What do monastics need? And this is a question that came up today. Thank you.
Good questions. The first was nobility. We are so fortunate to have had a teacher. Reference here is for Lord Buddha, the greatest of teachers, the teacher. Because of the thoroughness, the completeness in the instructions that he provided for us. No one can know the Dhamma fully. That's how vast it is. As Webu Sayadaw says again and again, no one can actually explain the Dhamma fully, even if one has spent a whole lifetime. Nevertheless, we have concrete, very specific, very definitive instructions and guidelines as to what makes a person, well, in this case, Sotapanna, which is the first level of awakening. Now, there are primarily 4 levels of awakening. The Sotapanna is the very first. What it means in Pali is basically, in English it means, in Pali it's Sotapanna, or the noun of it is Sotapatti. Stream winning, think of it as stream winning. What does that mean? Stream, winning. Winning what? How could you win a stream? Well, the person has finally made it and is now plunged into the stream. Where does the stream end up? In the ocean. What is the ocean being used as a reference for? Full and complete awakening. Why winning then? Sometimes it also is referred to as, in English, stream enterer, which is an unusual English. Well, you're trying to explain it, the whole concept in words. It's always going to feel awkward. So you need to develop the capacity to enhance your understanding or usage of the English word to capture the spirit of what we're talking about. Stream enterer means somebody who has, as I mentioned, plunged or entered into the stream, and there's no return from that. They have passed the point of no return. They will never fall out of the stream. That's why they win the stream. Stream in Pali, it's sota. So it's interesting how in this day and age where everything is trivialized, including the Dhamma is not immune to it. You have several, attempts by several groups, several people, several teachers that have claimed to be noble, have attained Sotapatti. There's individuals who have even committed suicide by believing that they have attained Sotapatti, so they can now, and nothing's working for them to deepen the practice. They have not attained actual arahantship, which is, by the way, the 4th level. Maybe I should address those first and then go into the examples. So, excuse me. I apologize. My throat is not the best, but anyhow. The first is Sotapanna, which a person, once they enter that stream, which is the certitude, the stream itself is gaining certainty. That's why we say winning the stream. Well, first of all, what happens when the person enters or plunges into the stream? By the way, you cannot make it happen. No one can make it happen. There's no shortcuts to it. There's no sneakily trying to convince and somehow, coercively or however way you want, make it happen. In the recent years, people have been using the avenue of what they believe is the jhanas that they're practicing. Some are, but to a very limited capacity. Nevertheless, they have interpreted it as if they really entered any of the jhanas, which are deep states of concentration, as well as a depth of experiencing meditation, sometimes horizontally and vertically, where they've used the jhanas as a means to get to Sotapanna. In their minds, that's how, because they look at some of the sutta and they do this through cherry-picking methods. But while being instigated, while being propelled, compelled, moved by desire. That is wrong. That is a sure way of falling short from coming even close to the path that might lead you to the stream. The path itself is obviously the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the middle path. Now within it, we have, I'm not going to explain it again, it's all available, the Eightfold Path. You can look it up, it's in the book I've written, and tons of other Dhamma talks. And suttas, of course, are replete with them. But there's there must be the presence of honesty, truth throughout. Satya is truth. But it also is resting upon right conduct, proper conduct, and right understanding. These two have to go hand in hand. Now, we're living in a time period where everybody's after the shortcut. Everybody's after finding means of tricking their way through and into Nibbana. And that is basically, as I said, prompted by a deep desire of craving, which is not coming from a right place. It would come from a right place if the person is in pain and suffering and they want to put an end to it. That is a totally different approach. That is a valid cause, an instigating factor that brings about this urgency, the samvega within the person to look for the way to Sotapanna. Because once they do win the stream, a few things happen which people don't pay attention to. Their significance, that is. There's a tremendous shift. In fact, it's such a huge shift in the personality that it is not temporary. There's such a huge transformation that happens. And that it is permanent. The transformation, the quality of that transformative series of events that happen are so compelling that you don't come around, you don't go back to the old ways of being and behaving. Being and behaving. That means right conduct has to be there. And you're every day developing a deeper and deeper layers of understanding that did not exist within you. You did not have the capacity. Even you go, wow, to yourself. How did I? And guess what? Something amazing is happening. Your unconditional respect, veneration, trust in the Dhamma is becoming exponential in its growth from moment to moment. To the point where if anybody shows up and speaks to you, Dhamma, what is against the Dhamma, against the teachings of Lord Buddha, against the truth, against nature, against reality, basically somebody who's trying to con you, somebody who's trying to lie to you about something about the teachings, it will not sit well with you. It doesn't matter who it is, where it's coming from, who is speaking them out loud, how big of an authority they might be, even in the Dhamma. You will know. Why? Because your saddha, your confidence and trust in the teachings of Lord Buddha is so compelling. It's like an earthquake. And you're moved all the time. The moment you see, you hear, you taste, you witness the Dhamma being expressed. And you will recognize the Dhamma from what is Dhamma. We get this, we are seen, we are witnessing this, we see it again and again and again in the suttas. Especially in the Anguttara Nikaya. That's a group of so many suttas that come to mind from the Anguttara, numerical discourses, where Lord Buddha is talking about this. In addition to the other suttas, of course. That's the one that came to mind right now. But one cannot minimize the changes in character. Now, no one can come and fool you. No charlatan can come and pull your legs, as they say, to try to convince you of something that is in fact not coming from Lord Buddha, but presenting it as Dhamma where you go ahead and buy it, where you go ahead and believe it, where you go ahead and even follow it and say, wow, this is deep. That can never happen. So anyone who claims to be a Sotapanna while following such false teachers is declaring the fact that they are not Sotapannas, and they never were Sotapannas. This is very important. Underline that last portion. Because it's not like you make a mistake and you go, oh, I'm sorry, this is, I realized something. No. A person who's truly a Sotapanna can never, for a millisecond, buy into such nonsense. It's impossible. That's why all those people who believe that firmly believe that they are Sotapanna, Sakadagamis, Anagamis, or whatever, while at the same time following teachers that are not following the teachings of Lord Buddha, that are not purely 100% based in their practice, in their teaching on the teachings of Lord Buddha, 100%. They cannot come from, practice Taoism, practice the Vedas, the teachings from the yogis, and then, yes, I also practice the jhanas, yes, I also respect the suttas. So it's a combination, it's a mix, it's a mishmash of all these things. And yes, I am a noble disciple, oh yes, or my teacher is presenting from different angles. No. It doesn't fly like that. It doesn't do that. It's just a fraudulent representation of what a teacher in this tradition is all about. So, no noble disciple could ever, at any point, fall for that. It's impossible. Why? Because they have entered the stream. That's why the person has that sense of certitude. Nothing can shake that. Nothing. That's why there's nothing as powerful as that. And that is the first layer of understanding Nibbana. Tasting Nibbana, which makes that person work even harder than they ever thought would be possible for them. So they don't look for excuses to, go and do other things. Leave the Dhamma and go and pursue some other thing. Or explore some other teaching. That is also impossible to happen for a stream winner, Sotapanna. They do not break precepts. Okay? They definitely are not engaged in deception. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's like peeling off their skin, their flesh. It's as unthinkable as that. Or selling their loved ones to total strangers, to murderers. It's as unthinkable as that for them to engage in such activities, as whether it's breaking precepts or following some other teacher other than Lord Buddha and his teachings. Because the sense of confidence and trust, the faith in the heart of that practitioner is so intense. That means if you happen to be a Christian, you happen to be a Hindu, you happen to be, a Muslim, you happen to be somebody, or even within Buddhism, if you were following some other tradition other than the original historical Lord Buddha's teachings, if and when a person attains it, and you can only attain it by practicing the teachings of Lord Buddha, the Noble Eightfold Path specifically, which are based on sila, which is virtuous living, unapologetically, samadhi, which is cultivation of the mind, purifying the mind, bhavana, proper, correct samadhi, and panya, which is the discerning understanding, the direct insight that comes. You do not have that in any other tradition out there. That's why it's only available in the teachings of Lord Buddha. Now, when the person becomes a Sotapanna, which is, I'm putting a lot of, I'm trying to highlight as much as I can at this point in time about the Sotapatti, the attainment of the first stage of awakening, because it's so crucial, because this is where a lot of people get it wrong. This is where some have miscalculated their so-called attainments, because they think that, or they thought that, they are now beyond the point of no return and they're good to go. and that they're set on their way to Nibbana. Well, you remember the thing about the not breaking precepts? The first is not to harm, not to kill intentionally. So if a person, like the one that came to mind was the Westerner, the British Bhikkhu in Sri Lanka. When Sri Lanka was still, a colonial, country basically, and they were occupied by several, entities in the past, governments, imperial, etc. So they didn't know what to do when this well-to-do author slash philosopher slash writer slash person who was very interested in intellectual efforts into, and somewhat was inspired by Buddhism, but was carried over by his aspirations and his ideas about the Dhamma, where he began cherry picking and ended up basically convincing himself that he had actually attained Sotapanna. But because he was also dissatisfied and he was also suffering from physical illness and psychological issues, I also will add, he convinced himself by looking at the suttas and again pursuing his cherry picking efforts, and convinced himself that some bhikkhus in the past who had attained or were close to attaining committed suicide, and that's how they entered into higher states of nobility. Because he believed that he was at least a Sotapanna. Meanwhile, he was in turmoil. Night and day he was writing. He was a disturbed character. And he went ahead and he killed himself. And the Sri Lankan bhikkhus there didn't know what to do with the situation, because he obviously committed, parajika, defeat. He actually killed himself in this case. But because there's no Lord Buddha available to look at the mind of this person, that he actually ended up not in where he wanted to go. And plus the fact that they were ex-colony of Britain. They were in a pickle. They didn't know what to do. So they had to go through the normal procedure and just treated him as a bhikkhu who had died. Pretty much. Ignoring the fact that this monk basically disrobed by his action. And now, unfortunately, you have now generations of usually Westerners, because they're mesmerized by the level of quote-unquote intellect or understanding. He's even written like volumes and volumes before he died. That is not the path of nobility. That can never be the path, because you look at the suttas, no such evidence is available. And you do not definitely see nobility in those people who have actually followed in the footsteps. I haven't killed themselves, I'm glad to say. They're not as foolish as that. None of them have attained. Why? How would you know? Well, at the very least, you would know by them no longer promoting such a character, such false beliefs. But this is one example where many people have gone cherry-picking from the suttas to fit their own agenda, and that's what we have. Different groups, different... you also have in... you listeners do know that I don't shy away from pointing out what are the errors that we see in the livelihood, the lifestyle of even bhikkhus in the world today, ajahns and all that, the sayadaws in Burma and in Thai forest tradition, or anywhere in the world. What is wrong we have to highlight. We have to speak about them and at least ask questions about these things. That is what Lord Buddha has taught us. You have the Majjhima Nikaya 47, Vimansaka Sutta, to just give you one example, where Lord Buddha invites us to scrutinize. In fact, it's mandatory for us to do. You also have it in the Samyutta Nikaya, of course. There's one where the 7 Jatila ascetics, the naked ascetics, where King Pasenadi one time is visiting Lord Buddha, and these groups of 7s come. 7 groups of naked ascetics, dreadlocks and all that, very dirty, very naked, barely wearing anything, disheveled, beard, etc., long nails, the typical, ascetic image that we get in mind when we hear about these things. Anyhow, he goes and salutes them and says, I'm King Pasenadi of Kosala, etc. He says this 3 times, and then he comes back to Lord Buddha. And he asks, Bhante, is it possible for us to know who is an arahant, who is not, who is noble and who is not? And the way Lord Buddha answers, and he doesn't answer yes and no, categorically yes or no, he explains it in such a thorough manner, complete manner. He says it is impossible for somebody who lives the household life, somebody who's run by passions, to really be able to make such a call, as it were, to really know how to distinguish between a noble person and not someone who's not. And that also goes to, to describe, in a sense, the scholarly so-called monks, Buddhists, bhikkhus, monks, lost in their own ideas, in their own conceits, to be able to know who is a Sotapanna, who is not, let alone an arahant. But unfortunately, you have plenty of them, plenty of these characters who claim to know, or even that they themselves are, and play with listeners or audiences or readers' minds with insinuations, double entendre and other things that they hint at to make the listener be fooled, because people are so gullible. Well, for that reason you need the suttas, to transcend, go beyond, cross over these teacher types and go to the teacher. You shouldn't be listening to just, what I'm saying here. You owe it to yourself. I'm giving you clues here. I'm giving you actual leads. I'm giving you summaries. And of course, I am encouraging you here to go ahead and really look them up. What is this Vimansaka Sutta? What is this Jatila, the 7 Jatila ascetics? That's from the Samyutta Nikaya, from the Sagatavagga, which is the first major book of the Samyutta Nikaya, which are the connected discourses. And it is in the Kosala, King of Kosala section, which is King Pasenadi's questions to Lord Buddha. So that are found in, and the one that I mentioned earlier, it's from the middle length discourses, Majjhima Nikaya number 47. Go look them up. These are not Bhikkhu Candana's made up stories. These are not anything like that. Your job, however, is to go and do your own digging. Hopefully you don't have to dig too much, because it's all there. Our effort is to make things easier for you. But I'm not going to give you my opinion for you to believe, and now you take me on as your teacher, and then we're back to square one. How will the Dhamma be your truth then? How will you understand what it means to be a Sotapanna? Because one thing happens, actually 3 things happen. Your sense of substantiality as a being, as a person, as an ego crumbles. The identification of Sakkaya Ditthi, the doing of a self, this constant making up of a self in your mind, this is me, this is who I am, that starts coming apart. The other is you look at the practice of rites and rituals, and it doesn't do anything to you anymore. It's no longer a path to awakening. You laugh when somebody says, if you do these exercises, you're going to attain Nibbana. If you chant these many times, if you do these things in this form, you're going to attain something. Or if you misplace one chant versus the other, all hell's going to break loose, as they say. You don't put so much credence on that. What happened? It disassembles, it gets dismantled. And you start paying attention to the things that really matter. What? Going faster down the stream. That's pulling you every day. Oh, the third thing I mentioned, I forgot to mention, the doubt, the skeptical doubt drops. Remember what I was saying about the Dhamma? That is so powerful in you. It's impossible for you to even, for a millisecond, to misconstrue, misunderstand, or misread the Dhamma. Similarly, to not see what is Dhamma for what it is. So, if somebody were to give you actual gold nuggets and some pyrite, which is known as fool's gold, it's going to scream at you. Most people can't tell them apart, by the way. But imagine yourself as a skilled, expert jeweler who works with gold day and night. Somebody hands you a piece of pyrite and says, "Oh, give me the, I want to cash this. Could you?" You throw it back at them, laugh at them, give them a nickel for a ton. Instead of worshiping the person, placing them on a high pedestal and flocking around him, while the group itself thinks of itself as a bunch of noble disciples, anywhere from Sotapanna all the way to Arahantship. You have groups like this, But unfortunately, nobility also carries with it anybody who misrepresents the teachings of Lord Buddha. Now, forget about them being, noble, but somebody who's not noble and pretending to be noble, unfortunately, there are consequences which people don't know about or want to talk about or hear, especially if they believe themselves to be noble. Their destination will only be the next birth. The only destination they will be headed to or will be the lower realms, and usually the hell realms. In some cases, if they've done good, generous deeds, maybe the animal realm, but usually hell realm or Peta realms. These people don't realize when they're misrepresenting the teachings of Lord Buddha what they're doing. The Dhamma is Dhamma. It's so pure that even Lord Buddha bowed down to the altar of Dhamma. Lord Buddha was the supreme. And he looked around existence, universe, and he said, to what would a Tathagata bow down? Is there such a thing? And he looked and he saw no being, no God, no Brahma God, no being deserving of such a thing. Why? Because if he did, their heads would blow up. Not the Tathagatas, the person to whom he would be bowing. So in protection of those, because they are all inferior to such a pure being. However, he said, the Dhamma, however, that is a different story altogether. So if Lord Buddha would be bowing down to the Dhamma, how can somebody who claims to be, noble disciple, go on carrying oneself, being and living and believing things that are adhammic, adhamma, through and through? So that is, by the way, some might be curious to know as to how many lifetimes does the person immediately be one. We're talking now back to about the individual who has won the stream, which is wonderful, because that means they will never, ever, ever step foot into the lower realms, including the animal realm. It's impossible. It's impossible. And at the most, they will have 7 more lifetimes to live in different realms. Doesn't have to be just human. So they could be in Deva realms, etc. But up to 7. Sometimes people think that they have to live 7 lifetimes. That's wrong. It could be even that lifetime. They don't even have to go to 7 or next life. But if they're pursuing the path of Dhamma in this life, where they attain Sotapatti, many of them actually attain Arahantship, either during that lifetime or at the transition from this life to the next, when they relinquish the fear or attaching themselves to the body and to any body, to any becoming state of bhava. And that's where, they lose balance. So if they end up in another realm, that would be one of those 7s. But they might attain there, but at the most 7 more lifetimes. Now the second noble person, you take all of these criteria that I just mentioned about a noble disciple. They're also called noble disciple in training. Training because they have not reached the apex, which is the arahantship, which is a full awakened one. So the second noble individual would be is a sakadagami, which means a person who comes back only one more time. There's differences you have explanations of this in the Anguttara Nikaya numerical discourses, where Lord Buddha explains as to the differences, but basically there are some who have to come back to earth for that one time. There are some that can go either to earth or to a heavenly realm, but none of them will go lower than a human realm. So this is great. This is really excellent for anyone in that state. And what happens is, for such a person, 2 other, by the way, the 3 I mentioned earlier that drop off, those are the sangyojanas, or the fetters that bind, the ropes or shackles. There's 10 of them, so 3 of them drop. The other 2, they don't get fully cut off, but they start to loosen up big time. One is the sense of anger, resistance, the hatred, aversive energy within the mind, the hating mind, the being prone to anger, that state. And the other is the lusting after things, pleasure, being passionate towards things. So these, as I mentioned, do not come off, but they do get shaken off and Sometimes I've had individuals ask me, could you describe it? Because especially those who have read on this for a long time, but they can't make a distinction between this person and the one that is to come, which is an anagami. Think of it as, the baby tooth. We've all had baby teeth. Imagine when, right before it comes off, it's still attached to the gum or the root, whatever you want to call it. And it's moving, but you can't pull it out. If you do, it's going to start bleeding badly. But it's moving, it's shaking. So think of these as two teeth that are still there attached to the jawline. So, as I said, they have only one more lifetime. They can either do it have it be in the heavenly realms, any of those realms, even Brahma realms, or human realms, depending on the purity of their heart and their desire for the re-becoming, which is what led them to the next birth, by the way, because there was craving in their heart. So the third stage is a person who, while alive, in whatever realm, either, when I say whatever realm, I mean either a human realm or a deva or higher realms, because these are the two major realms where a person can attain the Dhamma, can attain nobility. Not just humans, but you can never attain nobility while being a dog, for example, as an animal, or a hungry ghost. Definitely not as a hell realm dweller or asura. No. The lowest level of existence that one can be occupying is either a human realm or in the heavenly realms. Because the Dhamma is, once it is available to such a being at such a time, which is a rare thing, and to have the person be drawn to it and be humble enough and desirous enough for it, with that purity of desire that is for the Dhamma, which is Dhamma Chanda, such a person is truly rare. But it only occurs in these two aspects of existence, in the 31 realms of existence, either human or heavenly realms. So once the person has, this one will actually have those two teeth I mentioned pulled out. They fall out. Again, you're not doing this. There's no coercion. There's no secretive, there's no sneakily trying to do something, like I was mentioning about those characters who go and think that the only way to attain any of these is through the jhanas. That's wrong, because you could be attached to the jhanas. Even if they're the real jhanas, you could be very much attached to them, and good luck attaining anything that's supramundane with such an attitude. So, in the case of these are the anagamis. Anagamis are the non-returners. There is no lust. They don't think about sex. They don't think about flirting. They don't think about engaging in any kind of lust-ridden, any kind of passions. Now what they might have is the remainder, sometimes aspects of the language, which basically has to do with the sankharas and all that, but I don't want to get into them, the sankharas, because I think recently I also talked about it a bit. But anyhow, the anagami is a person who relinquishes that and the drive to hate, the drive to anger, rage, kodha, this anger, patigha, this desire for, seek revenge and things like that. They stem from that root. So for such a person, they can quickly forgive. Now, they're not dumb, they're not naive, they're no pushovers, but they're alert. But they know, they also understand impermanence, they also understand conditionality, and they also know, they have a better understanding as to the actions that people commit beings commit, and where ultimately they end up has to do with the actions and the choices that they make, those people who are making those actions, in spite of how one feels towards those actions, an external person feeling towards those actions the person is committing. It is their karma, Lord Buddha says. They are inheritors. People are the inheritors of their own karma. So an anagami doesn't have anything to do with that anymore. It doesn't get their hands dirty. And they never come back. Once they die, they never come back. If they happen to be a deva in one of the lower deva realms, or even the Brahma realms, when they die and they don't attain, just like the others, let's say, and they have slight, very subtle levels of craving in them, for the Dhamma even for teaching the Dhamma, or listening to the Dhamma, if there is slight craving even, they will end up being reborn, but they will not be reborn in any realm other than the pure abodes. The pure abodes that no being can be born into unless they are anagamis themselves. Anagamis themselves. So that means they don't have those two sangyojanas I was mentioning. And that is the place where they will be reborn, unless on the way they, at the end of that life, the one from which they died and ended up in the pure abodes, they attain right at that moment, or upon landing, Lord Buddha says, or with some effort, very little effort, or with a lot of effort, or they live a whole lifetime there, and it's a pretty long time, and they help out. There's only Dhamma there. And some of these beings have played such a huge role in the life of the sasana today, because they help us today even. These beings, some of them are already arahants in those realms that do help beings, especially on this planet, because they teach the Dhamma, where Dhamma is hanging by a thread in some cases. They are the promoters of proper understanding of the Dhamma. Many of them are already arahants in those realms. But all those who are not arahants, working towards that, if they've lived their whole life there, when they die, then they become arahants on that moment. But they will never drop from those realms. There's 5 different pure abodes. Anyhow, only anagamis are reborn in those realms, and sublime realms. And lastly, we have the arahant. And for this arahant, to be an arahant, for this stage, you need, in order for the person to become an arahant, they need to drop the remaining 5 sangyojanas. And those happen to be the desire for rebecoming in a rupa or form realms, the desire to be reborn or in a formless realm or realms, arupajanas, basically leaving this place to go to another place. So, the next one is a conceit. Conceit is mana, which comes in 3 forms. One is comparing the person to you, like on an equal level, constantly. Another one is looking down at others and saying, I am better than you. And the third kind is when you're looking up at others and saying, you are better than me, I am inferior to you. So I have to catch up all the time. So that creates commotion, which takes us to the 4th sangyojana, and that is restlessness. That's a tough one to get rid of or unbind yourself from, unshackle yourself from. That sangyojana is a tough one. But if the person persists, they will definitely be able to loosen themselves from these. And the last one is ignorance, avidya. because there will be only wisdom. There cannot be even a tiny little smidgen of avidya in the mind of a person claiming to be arahant. If you notice, there is no other tradition being mentioned here, because an arahant is Dhamma through and through. There is no yogic experiences, there is no interpretations from the Vedas, from the Brahmanic traditions, from the Gnostic texts, from Plato, from Socrates, from Upanishads, from Zoroastrianism, from Sufism, from this, none of that. There's no universalist, Unitarian church type of things, none of that. Those traditions are their traditions. They stay there. They have nothing to do with this. Because if a person is truly noble, they immediately walk away from that. It's like a candle that's melting. It's completely gone. It melts away. All the other stuff that you've done. Angulimala was a terrible serial killer. In an instant, just meeting Lord Buddha, he became a Sotapanna. He didn't hold on to even a small weapon, a knife. He had many, many weapons. That's how he killed almost 1,000 people. Himself, single-handedly. But that day when Lord Buddha came, because he saw the potential in him, because of all his good karma and all his good work that he had done in his past lives, he immediately became a Sotapanna, the first stage. And before he closed his eyes, for the last time in that life, as Angulimala, later on Lord Buddha called him Ahinsaka, which was his original name, the one who doesn't harm. Anyhow, before he died, he became an arahant. That's it. End of that book. No more lifetimes. So he completed the path, and he became aseka. Aseka is a disciple beyond the training, one who has completed the training, the patipada. So this is not in any way, shape, or form a thorough explanation of nobility, of course, but nobility does not come with birth. Again, it doesn't come with how much money one has or how much education one has, how much, especially education in the Dhamma. It doesn't come with how many followers one has, how many people who sit there with big goo eyes and listening to you and drooling is like, wow, wow, my teacher. None of that make you noble. It's your heart that makes you noble, especially when there's no one to observe whether you're keeping sila or not, whether you do have conceit in your heart or not. You will, however, and by the way, some special devas will too. They will know you cannot hide the purity of your heart from any of those levels of devas. And conversely, any impurity that might be there, you cannot hide those. And those are the things that will lead you to your next birth, wherever it may be. So you may sell yourself as a noble person now. You might actually have people who buy that. You have people, that's why I'm referring to this, because it's terrible. It's terrible to believe that you're a noble disciple. Really, really believe that. Meanwhile, your life is being lived in adhammic ways. You don't follow the teachings of the Buddha. Meanwhile, you are claiming something, a status, because somebody who hasn't attained at all, who's paying for it now, badly, severely, said to you something. And because of your own egocentric and craving-ridden tendencies, ignorance-filled tendencies, you're still maintaining that belief. That's wrong view. That's micchaditthi. Already you are on the wrong path. That means the first step of the noble, eightfold path is gone. You're not on the path. So how could you possibly be Sotapanna or any of those? And this is the life where you can still fix it. Otherwise, where you end up right after, it will be the lower realms. It's painful beyond anything you can imagine. People are screaming right now. Terrible, screeching, like beyond, like scowling beyond, like even an animal, a pig, when a pig is being slaughtered, they cannot squeal enough to describe to you how badly the beings, people that you considered your teachers are right now in hell. People don't realize this, and they still have time. They still have time because they're still alive. They can make a switch. Why? Because the Dhamma is purity. If a person and when a person misrepresents the Dhamma, it's bad. That's why Devadatta went straight to hell. You have countless suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, Lord Buddha saying, deposited directly in, as if deposited there in hell. He's going to be dragged and dropped in hell. So many times he says this. These are not aphorisms, these are not just folklore, these are not just fairy tales. Creatively, no, these are facts. Unfortunately, no one can make an individual who believes deeply without any valid proof other than texting each other, calling each other, emailing, and talking about the memories with so-and-so, yeah, do you remember this? And hanging out with each other. And that is their foundation. Us and them mentality. The Dhamma is completely left out. So that is completely, has nothing to do with nobility. And so that's one. What was the other question? Requisites? Requisites, okay. People today have forgotten the value of providing the requisites to those of us. When I say those of us, I mean monastics. I mean monastics who are living the noble life of a bhikkhu, samaneri. People today don't understand the value of their actions, especially dana. Dana is generosity, open-handed generosity, willful generosity. Not to maintain some tradition type of a generosity, not because it's a familial activity type of a generosity, but because of the amazing qualities that suddenly sprout within the person. What I forgot to mention was many of the times that you see in the suttas a person who's just a commoner, you could say, illiterate person, doesn't know anything. In fact, many times it's just an occasion where they are meeting Lord Buddha for the first time, or one of his disciples. And they do something. They usually do something. They provide a seat for a bhikkhu, for a monastic. They observe, and they're touched by you, and by your gestures, by your conduct. They're moved. And something inside of them gets shaken, and they feel compelled to be generous. And that is the silent, if you want to call it, spirit of the Dhamma. And that can come from the laity. That can come from the laity. Lay, meaning upasakas and upasikas, male lay disciples and female lay disciples. Consistency is key, however. It's not a one-time thing. Why? Because you're not breathing once. right? You don't eat once a month or once a week. Some might, but that cannot be maintained. I sometimes, fast, sometimes twice for 3 days and, with 1 day in between. I've done that, but, to my own health detriment, things like that. But, because I have, a very strict schedule of with Dhamma, the translations, all these narrations. But anyhow, I'm just one person. The Sangha at large in the world survives thanks to donations. Now, financially, I'm talking about that, but in essence, we were not allowed to collect money. The Vinaya is clear on that. However, times have changed. Times have changed. The Pindabada rarely happens in the world, especially Western world, modern world, even in Asia. You don't see that unless you're in the villages somewhere, this and that. And many monasteries in such remote villages do that simply to maintain the tradition, which is noble, which is beautiful. But in reality, it's not happening. So what people do and have been doing for many decades, in the West especially, as well as in the East, the people carry the food to the monasteries. The monasteries that are funded by groups of, committees, this and that, which are supporting with money, electricity, this and that. Robes come in, people donate robes. You also have, at the end of the Vassa, you have the Katina ceremony where robes are brought in officially, and then all the monks get those. That's another requirement. So the food, the shelter where they live, the robes, and the medicine. Those are the four primary requisites. But we all know if you're living in the world, especially in the modern world, you have other needs. Needs, really. Because what if you don't have a monastery? What if you don't have such a community? What if you do not have robes coming in? Okay? So I often wear the robes that were offered to me 5 years ago. So I stitched them, I put them together. That's what we're supposed to do. So in my travels recently in Australia, there were a family and students there who worked very hard and lovingly offered a full set of robes, which was quite moving, touching. So, but those are rare for my, but that's a requirement. But in addition, more importantly, sometimes people think that, it's just a thing that I do every once in a while. But no, it's a consistency that is required. Whatever a person, but you have to understand, and they've done this experiment, which I've shared, I think, at least once in the past, in New York, I think it was, years ago, where they saw, based on this study that was done in the streets of New York City, that between givers and receivers of, handout, basically, somebody, people giving money, and they saw on graph, they actually saw all the electrodes that were attached to them as they were giving and as the others that were receiving. It was a double-blind study, by the way. The givers ended up being much more happy than the receivers of these, and they were both playing a part. They weren't really in need of money, but they had been in those roles that they were playing for so long that they actually embodied that. And they really felt, when you're sitting there at the corner of some street, everybody's ignoring you. You believe that. You are that homeless person. And when somebody comes and gives you acknowledgement, looks at you, smiles and says, "Here you go, buddy," you feel amazing. But similarly, the person who was giving was blown away by the joy they felt. So, this Dhamma cannot survive without generosity of people. Because it's not just a giving, but also receiving. You also have to earn it. A person who doesn't know how to be generous cannot receive Dhamma. Okay? You have to be thoroughly committed to being generous. If you're holding on, if you're keeping something for, later on, and always people are saying, I used to be, a layman. I started working when I was 9 or 7. I earned a living since that very young age, before I even turned like double digit. So I know the value of money as a layman. So I've lived like that for a long time before being a bhikkhu. But Lord Buddha taught with both hands, both palms open. He never taught with closed fists. He says this in the suttas. We have to give without closed fists. That's why they have to be open-handed. So make sure that when you are offering these things to the monks, first of all, you know who you're offering it to. In Asia, there's a tendency of always going after, not just in Asia, I have to correct myself actually. In the world today, people like to donate to the bigger causes in their mind. The ones who have the biggest sounds, the biggest audiences. Because there's this old, decrepit and wrong belief that they've inherited from their parents. That if you give to the person who is famous or more older, in age and things like that, then your merits will be greater. Well, Lord Buddha demolished that idea, but people don't listen. Because all of the teachers at Lord Buddha's time were older than him, the famous ones. He was the youngest, and he had only gone forth recently as far as they were concerned. And he was giving Dhamma discourses that were incredible. But people were coming in final analysis, they were using his age and how many years of vassa he had as criteria for him to be judged and see if he was truly worthy to be called a teacher of Dhamma. So you have these discourses in the suttas, you have this, and Lord Buddha explains that one time, Vairanja, I think it's Vairanja Sutta from the numerical discourses, I think. He comes in, and this Brahmin comes in and is scolding Lord Buddha, saying, how could you not get up? How could you not get up for an elderly person who came in? All the other teachers, you're young, you're supposed to. And Lord Buddha's listening, and he says, I'll give you a simile here. He says, imagine you have a chicken, and it has 6 eggs. A chicken that has laid 6 eggs. He says, yes. He says, after the chicken takes good care of its, fluffy feathers, this and that, give it its, gestation period is over, and one of the chicks pops, hatches, comes out of the shell before the other 5. Who would you consider among these 6 chicks, possible chicks, because the other 5 haven't come out yet, who is the senior most offspring of this chicken? This, He says, of course, the first one who came out. He says, you're looking at him. Everyone else is still inside the egg. They haven't hatched yet. So, you have a lot of teachers out there in cocoons, in thick walled eggshells, and they're not planning on coming out. Why? Because it's very, very beneficial staying where they are, because they're pretty well taken care of. Why? Because you have a gullible society that still continues on wrong impressions, wrong understanding of the Dhamma. Why? Because I've seen this in person while I was in Asia. People have come to me and said, well, such and such an elder, who should I give to? The younger monk, to the elder monk? And I said, well, whoever you feel drawn to. It's not for me to say, but I was amazed. I was, not in a good way, at the intellect, at the drive, because they were thinking about punya. Punya are the merits, good meritorious actions, and dana is seen as meritorious action. But if you go ahead and give the money to that abbot who's taking that $1,000 check or cash or whatever, and because you believe that his blessing of your car is going to get you to be well so that you can get another million or billion coming in, this is not Dhamma. That is not a good intention to have. You must give wherever your heart is being drawn towards. And your heart must always be drawn towards the Dhamma. You must be moved to come to the Dhamma by the character of the Bhikkhu, by the actions of the Bhikkhu. Nothing else. Not how big of a monastery they have, not how eloquently they speak or not speak, not go emotionally either. Because sometimes people are afraid of monks that are direct. When you look at Lord Buddha's discourses, he was very direct, extremely direct. But he knew also when to be soft. But when you're always looking for soft, you're going to have a spineless society that lacks guts. And if you lack guts, if you lack courage, you definitely lack the properties that are required to really come to the Dhamma, practice the Dhamma, grow in the Dhamma, and become noble through the Dhamma. Is that okay? Is that? Sukhiya.